The Lauria. First things first, let's talk about how much it's going to cost to get this ship in your port. There are going to be free cybersynths that you can earn this holiday update, but it is not going to be enough, so let's go ahead and cover it. There is a free bundle in the store when you first log in for the update, so go ahead and pick that up for 500 cybersynths. You can get 3,000 for free, and then with the Admiralty backing, you can get an additional 4,500. So 2,500 doubloons, you're going to have to fork out for that. 8,000 if you spend 2,500 doubloons. We have the calendar here for another 1,000 cybersynths, and then weekly assignments every week. You will get 250, and this is a 6-week campaign, making that 1,500 free cybersynths each week if you are playing the game and completing those assignments. Now, that brings us to 10,500 total for free. The total cost of this ship, the Lauria, is actually 17,500, and the only way to get the rest of that is through Spectral Vault crate bundles. And I have it figured that you would have to buy 30 crates. You could buy one pack at 22,500, another at 12,500 for a total cost of 35,000 doubloons. Now, my recommendation would be to play through the update, get as much free cybersynths as you can throughout this 6 weeks, and then decide if you still want this shiny Lauria, especially after you see some of the CCs play her and give some reviews, and then decide, because this is expensive. I wouldn't be purchasing this myself. Now, what I would point out is for 10,500, you can get this ship, the Soviet ship, in the store. However you want to pronounce that, Pazharsky, that could be free, completely free, and we're going to cover that ship later on this week. Now that brings us on to the actual ship. Now we focused everything on the main batteries. Look at these things, 457 millimeters with SAP shells. They have a huge alpha, big pin, amazing pin angles, and amazing accuracy. The secondaries, I know that is tempting because, you know, Italian battleship, but this is not a secondary battleship. They're only 5 kilometers base. This is not a Colombo by any means. It is a ship that you really should be speccing into the guns and kind of playing at mid-range. So here are our modules, a little bit on dispersion here, concealment, and then reload. And that brings us to Angelo Iachino, basically a full reload build with Azerlane, Colorado, and D. Ravel. I would point out here that we are not using marksmanship because this ship has battlecruiser dispersion. So I'm actually testing this out to get this 5% more reload here. It's been working out okay. I don't know. I would test it a little bit more. You guys do some testing on your own actually and see what you think. But in theory, this should be a very accurate ship because it has a sigma of 1.9 and then again that battlecruiser dispersion. If you don't have Azerlane, Colorado, go for something else with reload, or you could use a basic Cunningham thing, which I don't think that I would really recommend it with a 1.9 sigma. Or you could use Kondo and possibly get cruiser levels of concealment because this is tied as the stealthiest battleship at the tier. Now we do have to talk about the armor before we move on because it's good and bad. It's a pretty robust armor scheme. And one thing that I really like is the very small superstructure, but you have to be careful of the citadel. As you can see, it's stepped up here way above the waterline. So if you go broadside in this ship, you will absolutely get wrecked. And, well, let me show you what I mean. Today's first match is going to be on Riposte, and we are mid-spawn here. And it turns out there is a certain former CC on our team over on the C flank. He was taken out of mainline service probably maybe even a year ago at this point for being a little too trigger happy or something like that. Scholars argue about what was said that fateful day between him and another CC that got him taken off the force. I think they were arguing about whose battleship was bigger or something along those lines. Anyways, he still streams and you can catch his musings every Saturday and check him out on his channel. Now, the first thing I would say about Lauria, the guns are pretty amazing. They feel inconsistent at times, and partially that could be because of my bad aim. This is a ship that you really need to aim and make sure that you're not just smacking armor belts with your SAP shells because it is going to lead to shatters. Now, we actually have the armor piercing loaded here at the beginning, and my thought process was it'll allow us to punish a cruiser if we catch him earlier. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, the cruiser that we ran into first is a Minotaur, and in another cruel twist of fate, don't show broadside to a Vermont. Now, I love showing battles like this because it just shows that if you make an incredibly silly mistake early on, you can redeem yourself. You can bring it back. You know, just because we lost all of our HP doesn't mean the battle is over. Very nice shot by the Vermont, and of course that would be the one ship at this tier. Well, actually, any battleship you're not going to want to flash Lauria's signs at. But what I was saying about Minotaur has less than 100 millimeters of plating, and that means we can citadel her with the semi-armor piercing shells. Now, the other cruisers, you know, if that had been a Des Moines or a Worcester or literally anything else except Risbon, you would need to switch to the armor piercing. So I do think shell selection is important in this ship, but luckily we got the Minotaur off the board, and it almost makes me just getting slapped worth it. Now, what I'm doing now, I'm looking at the map and seeing that the two battleships that were kind of behind me are coming this way now. So that leads me to want to go back to the other side of the map. And we are spotted, so the Smalland is over here, and I'm not too keen on sailing directly into a destroyer. Especially with a Vermont over here that, well, he seems to have my number. So we're going to come back over to the other flank and get some distance between us and our battleships here in the middle of the map. I'm being hesitant to turn in, again because we're spotted, and again because of how easy it is in this game just to pull an auto-aim shot. If you are spotted anywhere on the map and someone has a line of sight, all they have to do is click LT and then zoom in a couple of times, pull the trigger, and it could very easily be a dev strike. It's one of my complaints about this game versus PC. PC, if you don't actually see the ship and see where their waterline is, it is a lot more difficult to do that. But in Legends, it is so easy just to, I call it the auto-aim special. Auto-aim dev strike somebody. Anyways, we are sailing back in here, and we'll get this match underway. Like I was saying, the guns, they're pretty amazing. 457 millimeters is huge, and the SAP shells can do absolutely nutty things because they pin 114 millimeters of armor. And the alpha damage is huge, 14,900 per shell. I would say most of the time you would want to just fire the SAP shells, but there are a couple times in this game where we had the wrong shell selected, and there's another one coming up that I will show you. Now, Holland is spotted, and these SAP shells, even though they're only going to deal a fraction of the damage because the caliber size is so large against DDs, it is a mechanic to protect destroyers in our game. Because the alpha is so big, you can still absolutely punish destroyers, and you should shoot at them every opportunity you get with the semi-armor piercing shells. I mean, almost 15,000 damage per shell. Pretty wild. The gun angles really aren't that bad either. It's not Columbo good. Columbo is goated, of course, but you can maintain a pretty good angle and be tanky in Lauria and still get your shots off. We're going to take a little pause here and try to shoot sneaky-like on the Vermont, and it wasn't sneaky enough because there is a Des Moines sitting right there. But luckily Vermont had already shot, but yes, a little bit of PTSD. And hey, it wouldn't be a Derka video without my controller batteries dying in the middle of a game, and this one is completely my fault. We streamed yesterday for 4 hours. Well, if you're watching this tomorrow, I streamed Sunday for about 4 hours and didn't bother to change out the batteries. And this is some Amazon 4-pack of batteries, and they really are not very good at all, I have to say. The accuracy. You only have 8 guns, and that is worth noting. I mean, compare it to Columbo where you have 16. But the Sigma is 1.9, and we are sailing dark here as I set my controller down and walk over and get another battery pack. This is peak gameplay. I tell you what, where a portion of the match we're not even playing, there is a quick change on the batteries, and we're good to go. But yes, 1.9 Sigma, that is on par with Montana, and Republic is a ship that you love to see in the Lauria. You can basically pin it everywhere. So we should be able to deal some pretty good damage, and Jerk got a good hit right before us, so there goes that ship, and we're going to keep pushing out to this flank. But 1.9 Sigma is the same as Montana. However, the Lauria gets battlecruiser dispersion, and Montana just has battleship dispersion, so in theory, the ship would be a lot more accurate. And that is why I really wasn't speccing much more into the accuracy, because theoretically the ship should be pretty accurate. We have the reload down, I believe, to around 21 seconds. So very, very fast. And let's see. Yeah, did you see the salvo on that Des Moines? Heavy cruisers, if you hit them anywhere above the belt, you are absolutely going to melt them. And that was a salvo for 21,000 damage, I believe. And Vermont had another salvo there, but we saw it coming, so we slammed the brakes and turned in and was able to survive, because that would have been a kill shot for sure. Conqueror is another battleship that is really fun to shoot at in the ship, and luckily he had high explosive loaded, or we might have been dead there as well. But you can see the soft parts of that ship. Ships with large freeboards, above the belt, big superstructures, the Lauria just loves. And we're going to take one more shot at the Conqueror here, and should be the end. Well, it'll definitely be the end of him now. Somebody smacked him there. Another thing worth pointing out that is unique to the Lauria. You have an observer spotting plane, and it improves your shell grouping 15% instead of the normal 10%. So while it's active, your accuracy is just going to be completely on steroids. The one thing we didn't talk about are the armor penetration angles of the SAP, and not to get too technical, but basically they only auto ricochet at 10 degrees. So unless an opponent is completely bow onto you, you can still shoot them in the bow and deal pin damage. So very good. Pin angles are 70, 80. Yeah. There are some bad parts about this ship though. The AA is terrible. It is the worst at Legendary Tier, and the only saving grace of that is it seems to be maybe only 1 out of 15 or 1 out of 20 LT matches actually have a Hikiryu or a midway in it. So that is good, because this ship will easily be picked on by aircraft carriers, maybe when they populate the tier more, although still it's just not a very popular class of ships. And it being in the bureau and taking so long to get, there are a lot of factors in the reason that there are not many Hikiryus or midways up here. But I'm not complaining. Are you? It's kind of nice to, sometimes have a tier that you can go to and not worry about that. Right now, tier 7 is kind of annoying. I've been running into a lot of people doing anchor divisions where they'll take out a Chkalov at tier 7 and then they'll division with 2 tier 8 AA ships like a Smallland or Nebraska, Connecticut. I can't remember what that ship is. The battleship, the hybrid battleship, has crazy AA. And, oh, it's so cheap. It's fine. It's normal. It's not breaking the rules, but it's no fun to play against. And then if you can come to Legendary Tier and be assured you're not going to deal with that, then it is kind of nice. Now we're going to try a cheeky split our salvo here to see if we can get the Vermont and then also deal damage over here. It seems like, I don't know, 7 out of 10 times I actually do that. It doesn't work out. It never works out. So we should have just killed the Vermont, but that's okay. As you can see, angled, the ship does pretty good. You just have to be careful and make sure you're not flashing the broadside like I did. You don't really have a big HP pool. What you do have, though, are decent heals. These are actually Giuseppe Verdi heals, and they should give you back about 17,740 health per heal. So even with the small HP pool, if you factor in those 3 heals, you have the same effective HP pool as a Conqueror. So you can be a relatively tanky ship if you are playing it safe. And with the Vermont dying there, that is the end of that game for a decent 180k. As you can see, some of the salvos in that match, hit or miss. And I think a lot of it has to do with aiming and just making sure you're not hitting armor belts. Now, the other thing that I would point out, when the Vermont was kind of broadside to me, I should have switched to the armor piercing, because these are really good armor piercing shells as well. And I probably maybe could have killed him a little bit faster if I didn't just stick to the semi-armor piercing shells. You definitely need to watch out for broadsides and take advantage of the AP. Not to mention, I'm using On Second Thought, and you can switch shells 55% faster. I never remember that I'm using On Second Thought. As far as I'm concerned, there's only one commander where that really matters, and it's Azerlane Dunkirk, where you can switch instantaneously. But still, it is there, and I need to pay more attention to switching shells, and if you want to be a really good Lauria captain, you should do the same. Now, we did already talk about the armor, but one other thing I wanted to point out about this ship that is really good. Look at the freeboard. Look how low she sits in the water. Compare it to something like, well, Republic or Yamato. She sits very low and it's a sleek profile, so ships with a lot of vertical dispersion might just straight up miss you. And that is pretty nice. Maneuverability. She goes 35 knots. We're not going to use it a lot in this match. We're going to be pretty stationary here. I like to keep my lanes of fire open. As you can see, CCAP is contested, so if there was a DD that I could shoot and support my DD, that is definitely what I want to be doing. I hate playing in a destroyer and I look behind me for support, and they're all behind an island. So we're just going to play it safe right here, and if we get a shot at the destroyer on the enemy team, we are going to take it. But yeah, 35 knots is great. Schlieffen, I think, is the next fastest at 34.1, and then the Burgonia might be after that, but Burgonia gets that nice French speed boost, but still, 35 knots of base speed is beautiful. One thing that is kind of bad about the Lauria, though, is a 1,000-meter turning circle. Only the Grosser Kurfürst is worse than that. Repub is going to show some skin here, so we should be able to smack him pretty hard, and let's load AP for the follow-up salvo. Yeah, not bad. Pretty saucy. We still shattered, 2, I suppose, which is kind of frustrating. Now, the other thing I'm noticing, I think the Michelangelo is pushing around this quarter and possibly the Yamato, so we're going to go ahead and set up for those guys. And Michelangelo actually, I believe, is a little bit faster than what I was expecting here and kind of surprises me a little bit. That's not a ship that you want to be close to. I'm sorry, to be broadside to. The, the 310 millimeter Julio Cesare guns hit pretty hard, especially with this really weak Citadel. So, or maybe I was trying to take a cheeky shot at Yamato here, and then he surprises me. But either way, we're sitting flat broadside, and I would not recommend that. The rudder shift is a little bit above average, so that'll kind of help us maneuver as soon as we see that, yep, there he is. So we'll take our broadside salvo as well. And I remember this being a very disappointing salvo. Yeah, only 3 pins. So our accuracy wasn't quite there. And I don't know how we shattered one, but anyways, we did. I think over pins with the armor piercing shells on lighter cruisers could definitely be an issue with Lauria, considering these are 457 millimeters. You definitely could be over pinning. Now, the other really nice stat about this ship, and it's one of my favorite characteristics of a battleship, is the concealment. You're actually tied with the Conqueror as being the most concealed battleship at Legendary Tier. You don't have that awesome exhaust smoke generator, which is one of my favorite battleship consumables. It's just a get out of jail free card for sure. And I do miss having that, but the ship would probably be overpowered with it. So there's that. As I was saying, though, some of the salvos seem inconsistent. I don't know if part of it is the low barrel count that does that. You know, most other ships, you are shooting, think of the Montana 12 guns, the Colombo 16 guns, 12 guns on the Burgonia. So usually you have a lot more hate flying through the air. So I feel like the salvos are kind of hit or miss. And again, with the semi-armor piercing shells, if you get 1 or 2 shells that also just smash on the belt and don't do any damage, then it's going to make your salvos feel really bad. Now, this should be a decent salvo on Yamato, chunking his upper belt and his superstructure. Let's see how it does here. Yeah, Yamatos are another juicy target to shoot at. Some of the ships you might be a little more frustrated with, though, are the Grosser Kurfürst. It's pretty relatively tanky and very good against SAP. And please excuse me as we do a little bit of a T-Bull shuffle here to get away from these guys. I don't like playing this corner of the map up here. I feel like this always happens. Like, you can rush, but there's still a DD and C, so that's not advisable. And pushing into a Michelangelo is never a good idea. So then you end up in situations like this, which I don't like. It's not the most riveting gameplay, but I don't want to die. So we're going to stay angled and we're going to play this all try hard like. But eventually we'll get to turn back in here and finish off the rest of this battle. I don't think this is the easiest battleship to play at Legendary Tier. I don't think it's the strongest either. It's good, don't get me wrong, but it's just, using the SAP shells can be a little bit more difficult. because you really need to pay attention to where you're aiming to get the most out of it. That in the squishy citadel. Now, this event, I think, you know, the economics of it are a little bit expensive, but hey, aren't they every year? The Ohio, the Yoshino, the Lion, whatever they are, this event is always expensive. You don't have to buy this ship, and if it were me, I wouldn't. I think you have a lot of other options that you could use your event currency on, such as the Tier 7 Soviet cruiser. And again, forgive me on the name, but Tier 7 is such a great tier to farm at. I think it could be an interesting cruiser. It's AP only. It's basically like a Kuchezov with improved AP angles, no HE. Kind of a letdown. Sometimes AP only cruisers like that can be really easy to counter, and that can be frustrating to play, but still, we will cover that ship as soon as I can this week because I think it could be the best option. Now, I say free. You're going to have to spend the Admiralty backing, which is 2,500 doubloons, and I think that's $10 US. So still, a $10 premium and all the goodies that come along with it is not a bad idea. So the event, in my eyes, is still pretty good. There are lots of options out there, not to mention the duplex. Geez, if there's anyone French in the comment section, it's a tier 4 French cruiser that will be completely free. You don't have to buy the Admiralty backing to unlock that one. So that is an option as well. And, you know, just all the other goodies that come along with the event. I definitely would not recommend whaling for Lauria or even spending all the money unless you really enjoy Legendary Tier, unless you really enjoy using SAP main batteries, because that is really what this ship is about. And yeah, I don't know, like this salvo and the next salvo on Michelangelo, they're a little disappointing. You know, the accuracy, we only got 2 shells on target. Yeah, there's goods and bads of the ship. I think she is super fun. I love the speed. I love the hard hitting guns. I like the, you know, the turret. The turret angles are pretty good, and the Giuseppe Verdi heals, not bad, but I definitely wouldn't recommend whaling for it. If I had to compare her to the other Legendary Tier battleships, like when it comes to strength, I still would put the Bergonia above her. I probably would put the Colombo above her. Colombo is still so easy to play with your exhaust smoke, 16 guns, and then your crazy gun angles. So Lauria, to me, doesn't make it into the strongest category, but she is super, super fun. So yeah, take it all with a grain of salt. And of course, I would love to hear from you guys what you think of this event and what you think of the Lauria. And we are sailing in here. There are 2 DDs left. And the reason I haven't already skipped to the end of this one is because we're going to get a juicy salvo on a destroyer here, and I wanted to showcase it to you guys. Now, I think this salvo on Michelangelo is actually kind of good, but let's see here. There we go. Finally get a good salvo with 5 pins on him, and even better, in 8 seconds when we're loaded, we are going to get a good salvo on, I believe it's a Smollett. Now we have our 15% shell grouping buff going on here with our spotter plane, and let's wait for it. There he is. He's got maybe 11k health. Yeah, 5 shells, 8,300 damage, absolutely punishing. So this thing is pretty good against lolly bolts if you get the salvo like that and you get the dispersion to match up. But yeah, would love to hear what you guys think about this event. Let me know down below in the comment section. This is Derka signing off. I'll catch you in the next one.